Your voice, your opinion, your community. Fact TV, free speech protected.
Good afternoon or good evening. Could be either one. All I know it is very cold outside. I was talking to producer real earlier. There was 80 degrees a couple of days ago. Now in its 40s, and it's going to go down to like 21 tonight. Oh, all those people who planted their flowers over the weekend could end up with frozen dead flowers. So today, this is the third show where we'll continue with the PACT Act, Camp Lejeune. The first show we took care of the Camp Lejeune. Last week we took care, we started on the PACT Act and how it can affect and what benefits that a lot of veterans can apply for. We talked about first one part for Vietnam veterans, Vietnam conflict or war veterans, where the areas for Agent Orange herbicides and some of the other ones were expanded not only from being in Vietnam, boots on the ground, or not flying over Vietnam with the Blue Water Navy within 12 miles of Vietnam. Now it also includes Thailand, includes Guam, few other places, Johnson's Atoll, where a lot of the Agent Orange and other chemicals were burnt to be and destroyed. And so as far as Vietnam, the ones who served in that area, the VA added hypertension, and they added a rare brain cancer. The rare brain cancer, I've come across one case of it, and I was able to go back and file for the widow because her husband served in Vietnam. And about 3 years after coming back at the age of 29, he died of that brain cancer. So we were able to get her service connected for that brain cancer. But for high blood pressure is really important, and basically because high blood pressure is a root cause of a lot of other illnesses that can cause the death of a veteran. I had one veteran who did have high blood pressure while he was in the service, and he died of a ruptured valve. And we were able to prove that his high blood pressure was the cause of the ruptured valve. Plain and simple. Anybody who's ever used a garden hose, and if you put too much water in the garbage in through the garden hose, what usually leaks, it's the connectors that leak because that's usually the weakest part. And so if the high blood pressure causes, you can have a ruptured valve. And that would be service connected because that would be a secondary condition to high blood pressure. Okay, strokes are a secondary condition to high blood pressure. And so that's really important. So if you fit the Vietnam category and you've been within 12 miles, if you're in the Navy, you're within 12 miles of the shores of Vietnam, 12 nautical miles. And we can easily find that up. If you don't know, we just look up your ship, and then we go into the ship's logs, and they will go in and tell us where the ship was whenever the ship penetrated the 12 nautical miles. If you flew over, and you can prove that you flew over, you served in Cambodia, you served in Thailand, you were in Guam, again, those would be able to, I highly recommend that you come in and file a claim. You can see a person, you can do it online. There's a number of different ways. You can go up to, say, for example, White River Junction or the C Block in Brattleboro and say, hey, I want to file a claim for hypertension. Be warned that when you file a claim for hypertension, the chances of you getting higher than a 10% are pretty slim. So far, we're up to just 2 people have received the 20% for hypertension that we've worked with, and it's one of those. It's 20%. You know, do you really want to have 20%? 20% may be worth $300, but it also has a lot of risk. Most of the veterans are going to get 0% service connected, but 0% service connected covers you for all the secondary conditions that could be related to high blood pressure. And I think I've said it before, but it bears repeating. No ethical doctor or medical provider is going to take you off all your high blood pressure medications so you can go to a VA comp and pen exam to find out how bad your high blood pressure is. Isn't going to happen. Like I said, it's not ethical way to do it. It isn't worth the risk. Plain and simple, the question is, 1, if you have high blood pressure, you have high blood pressure, it's service connected. The second part is, how does that high blood pressure affect your ability to work? Well, if your high blood pressure is under control with medication, it doesn't have a really affect your ability to work. The only thing it can do is if you don't take your high blood pressure pills when you're supposed to take them, then it could really affect your ability to work. Again, if you served in that area, especially Thailand and all those other places, and you have diabetes, come in, file a claim, because now if you're in Thailand and Guam, you're eligible to be service connected by the VA. Okay? The VA doesn't care if you're 475 pounds and you eat the worst junk food every day and you do nothing whatsoever to control your diabetes. If you served one day in Thailand During that time frame, the VA is going to say you're service connected for your diabetes. That's just the way the law is written. That is called the presumptive condition. You do not have to prove that it was a result of military service. And again, for diabetes, if your diabetes is under control and you do diet and exercise, that's a 10% disability. If you have to take metformin, that's 20%. So like, for example, a 10% is worth about $170. A 20% is worth about $340. Okay, but the key is that the 20%, that means the VA pays for all your medication for your diabetes. Second, if your diabetes is not that controllable and you have to take insulin, the VA will give you 40%, and then you're up to about 600 something bucks a month. But I'd rather not have diabetes than collect $600-700 a month for the diabetes. But the VA takes care of that. But also, one of the things with the secondary conditions, neuropathy in your legs, neuropathy in your feet, neuropathy in your arms, neuropathy in your eye, all those can be secondary conditions to diabetes, and that increases your percentages. So, yeah, the VA will pay you money, but of course, your quality of life is not improved by the money. Your quality of life would be great if you didn't have diabetes, or if you didn't have high blood pressure, or you didn't have COPD, or some of the other conditions. So that's what the PACT Act has been doing for Vietnam veterans. Okay. And so, but there's a point, I'm going to bring up now an important part with the PACT Act. It's called the terror part. It's called the medical nexus exams for toxic exposure risk activities. What is that? Okay, that is extremely important. And why is it extremely important? When I was in the Marine Corps, I ran the first time I ran the Boston Marathon. I did it in 2 hours and 32 minutes, and I finished in 152nd place. The second time I ran the Boston Marathon, I got down to 2 hours and 30 minutes, and I was 317th, I think, that place. I was running my 3 miles under 15 minutes. I was doing all this stuff. Then I went to Okinawa. And while I was on Okinawa, being a first lieutenant young and everything, and I got exposed to a bunch of chemicals. We were I was an engineer, we were putting some stuff in, and then we unload we were digging up and we exposed that there was 106 barrels of all kinds of stuff. It was leaking and everything. And I had to work during the typhoons and stuff. And there was the place was flooding out and we were going through, and we didn't know that all the toxic stuff was there, and we were underwater and everything. Well, up to our necks, trying to get stuff to save the area from flooding and rupturing 20,000 gallon JP4 and JP5 fuel bladders. After that, I started having some problems, and I would get lightheaded. I would, I could pass out. I'd be collecting the second wind and stuff. But it would come and go. And I really didn't think much of it. And, just keep on pushing forward. But I remember having a real weird feeling and everything, and basically I went to the hospital and sent home for about a week, and they couldn't understand what was happening. They thought it was some central nervous system problems. And then I was in the first Gulf War, and it was getting worse. And I came back, and they said, "Oh yeah, you're just stressed, just a lot of stress." And we were going. And then just brain problems and everything. Then I had a growth in my chest, and ended up being thymus cancer. There was only about 400 of those a year. And then we found out we couldn't understand it. My heart was perfectly fine, but I could be exercising and my blood pressure would just drop right off. My heart rate would just drop right off. And they kept going. It was like, wow, this is it. And so finally they had to put a pacemaker in. Then I went and got prostate cancer. And then I was at White River Junction, and the doctor up at White River Junction went and said, "Hey, you were in Vietnam, right? Because you have all these Agent Orange conditions." And I said, no, I wasn't in Vietnam. She says, "Yes, you were, because you're the right age and everything." I said, "Well, no, I was going to college, the officers program." And we're just going. And then she connected me with an individual in Japan who was doing a lot of research and stuff. And we were going. But the VA goes, "Sorry, Mr. Roberts, you were never in the area, so we're not even going to test you for dioxins or any of this other kind of stuff." Well, it took me about 8 years to put everything together, being denied by the VA, going up to the Board of Veterans Appeals, getting denied, and keep going back and forth. And, excuse me, then the VA goes, and the judges finally said, "Hey, wait a minute. This guy put everything together. He showed us the pictures. He showed us the research. He did all this stuff. unlike the hundreds and hundreds of other veterans who went to apply to the VA and said that they were exposed to Agent Orange on Okinawa, and they were all denied. The reason why they were denied? Because every time the VA asked the Department of Defense, the Department of Defense would come back and say, we cannot locate any record saying that we had Agent Orange on Okinawa. Also, Okinawa at that time was a protectorate of the United States, and it would have been illegal for the United States to have those type of chemical weapons and stuff and biologicals on Okinawa. And plus that would open up Pandora's box. And so kept going. And veterans still come and ask and say, hey, Colonel Roberts, or Mr. Roberts, can you tell me how I can get service connected for Agent Orange on Okinawa? I tell them over and over again, you cannot get service connected for Okinawa. The VA will never admit there was Agent Orange. The VA will say the DOD has never authorized or never said there was Agent Orange on Okinawa. And DOD would say, nope, not on. To give you an example how it goes, when I came out and I said, hey, and I said this was what's happening, and I had pictures that with the barrels uncovered and leaking in different colors and everything, the Department of Defense hired this reserve colonel, Air Force colonel, who happened to work for one of the companies that helped produce Agent Orange. He did it before, and he's always said there was, he's even stated numerous times, Agent Orange is not hazardous to anybody's health. So he went over to Okinawa, did a bunch of research, everything, produced this 50-page report. And I was able to get a copy of the 50-page report. And in that report, he had stated that the quote-unquote military speak, legalese speak, saying that the lieutenant who has made this statement may have been mistaken. He didn't say I was mistaken. He said I may have been mistaken when it came to the barrels. Okay? You know what irritated me about that? One, Major Lord and Lieutenant Colonel Fitzgerald, both of my two bosses who both served in Vietnam and both knew about it, and both had me load the stuff up on trucks. And later it found out, years later, they took it to the other side of Kadena and dumped it in Kadena. They covered it up. This Air Force Reserve colonel, okay, I was retired. All Department of Defense had to do was issue me orders back to active duty for a week or two, put me under oath, and have me questioned. I had made the allegations, and I had done all this and laid it all out and they done the whole report with never once contacting me at all. Not by phone, not by email, not bringing me on to, excuse me, active duty. Okay. So to get back to what I was talking about, the toxic exposure risk activities. Why is that so important? Okay. I ain't getting this thing working, but one of the reason it's going to be important is because when I won my case for service-connected disabilities for Okinawa, I said my disabilities were due to toxic hazardous waste exposure. Why is that important? Because when it comes to Agent Orange, you need dioxins to make Agent Orange. But if you have dioxins, it doesn't mean you have Agent Orange. But my argument was, it doesn't matter if the dioxin is in Agent Orange or the dioxin is by itself. They can both kill you. Plain and simple. Dioxins can kill you. Also, PEBs from the electric boxes, okay? That's toxin. Tetracycline, stuff you wash airplanes with, cause toxins. Okay? Camouflage paint is a toxin, which also can cause cancer. So right now, I know there's some really small print, but herbicides, burn pits for waste disposal. Okay, burn pits for waste disposal do not have to be restricted to Southwest Asia. I just got a guy service connected. He was in Vietnam and he worked outside of a MASH unit. And what happened was they had to dispose of burnt body parts, all kinds of stuff from the operating rooms and everything, and they were thrown in a burn pit. Okay, if you were in Vietnam, what we had to do was say, yes, here it is in his record, this is the unit he was with, hospital unit, this is how they disposed of the human waste. Bingo. So you don't get the presumptive because you're in Vietnam, but you get the presumptive, VA now has to evaluate that. They didn't have to evaluate it before. Okay. 29 Palms, other places, Fort Irwin and things, in the 70s and 80s, 90s, you burnt a lot of things, trash and the whole works. Sulfur fires, Camp Lejeune, water supplies, pesticides used during the Gulf War. Okay, Before I went to the first Gulf War, I lived in Southern California, Irvine, California. And then they would go in and say, hey, we're going to be spraying malathion, really teeny droplets, so bring your animals in, cover up all this stuff because we want to kill the fruit flies. So I'm in Jubail Airport in Saudi Arabia, and we got the 12-holers. And for anybody who's been in the service, you know what they are. Basically, we don't have single-serve outhouses in the military. We have 6-holers, 8-holers, 12-holers. So, you know, there's no modesty. 12 people can be sitting down there taking a crap at the same time. You know, and I look up and I see these big blocks like this. And I went and asked, I said, what the heck is those big blocks? Oh, the corpsman says, oh, sir, those are malathion blocks. I go, holy crap. In Southern California, they're talking parts per billion, and we just have these big blocks up there. He goes, well, sir, there's so many bugs and everything over here. What are we going to do? You know, when you get ready to go to war, they don't look at the long-term effects. Industrial solvents. Oh, got to keep your weapon clean. You got to do this. Look at all the different solvents that you use in the military. Okay, so now all those solvents, they have to take a note. So you go and say, hey, I worked, you may have some, so I worked in the maintenance. So say I worked in engine maintenance. So I would have to take apart engines and clean them and put them back together. Look at all the industrial solvents. So engineer mechs weren't covered before. Now they are covered. Okay, air pollutant, yeah, the Isugi, Japan, wastewater, waste incinerator, sulfur fires in Iraq, oil well fires during the Gulf War, sand, dust, and very small fine particulars or liquid droplets. Okay. So people in the Middle East, served in Africa, served in Southwest Asia, you can have some really bad dust storms, sandstorms coming in. And so again, they don't have all the sanitary conditions that we have. So if say I'm the Bedouins and I have a big herd of sheep or a big herd of goat, okay, and they're urinating and the feces putting droppings all over the sand. Well, when they break down, they get in. So when a sandstorm picks up, all that waste, untreated waste, goes with that sandstorm. Okay. A lot of places, again, people need to go to the bathroom. They just go out, dump it, and move on. Again, that can dry up in the sun and then take care when the sandstorms come. And sand, dust, and very small, fine particulates or liquid droplets. Okay? You have a storm and it picks up. I'll give you an example. When I was in the first Gulf War, a lot of people were getting really dehydrated and they're going, holy crap. And they were getting to a point that had to be on IVs and stuff. And again, right off the beginning, you don't always send everybody. But later on, they sent some, kind of preventative medicine type of people and everything. And they go, holy crap, well, now we know what the problem was. The Saudis treated their vegetables and their gardens and all that kind of stuff with wastewater. Okay? For the Saudis and stuff, it was no big deal. Their bodies were used to that bacteria. Well, because the wastewater in the United States was treated, and you just can't take untreated wastewater or limited treated wastewater and put on the farmland, we didn't have those protections. We didn't have those liners in their gut. So it just called us, and we used to call them the ballistic craps. We were a little bit more colorful because you could take something in and minutes later it was right through your whole body. Again, different, so you have to be really careful. Those liquid droplets, you don't know where they came from. They could be from a pool of wastewater. Okay, and occupational hazards, asbestos, just because you've been exposed to asbestos doesn't mean you have a problem. You have to have asbestosis. And so when you have asbestosis, then VA will ask you, do you smoke? Where'd you work since you've been out? And all these other ones to see if you've had exposure to asbestos. But if you hadn't had exposure to asbestos, then it would go, like I got a successful claim to a gentleman that served on 3 carriers. And and the Navy knew asbestos was dangerous, but they wanted the priority was to save the ship. The easiest thing to keep the ship from catching on fire was asbestos. Okay? And there's a difference between being exposed to asbestos and having asbestosis. And you don't want to have asbestosis because your time is not very long, your remaining time. And they look for asbestosis for like those little curly cues in the lining of your lungs. Again, industrial solvents. Okay, now if you worked in the missile silos and cleaning them, doing maintenance and all that other kind of stuff, before that wasn't covered, now it's covered. Lead. Yes, that's depending on working on the rifle range, how long you've been around there. Radiation. That's a question, you know, if you worked on the submarine or on some of these places, you have to come up with a nexus and prove to the VA that you were exposed to radiation and this was caught. So we would do some research. You got vibration, depending on what type of equipment or aircraft you're in. Noise, fuels. There's some research showing that exposure to JP8 can cause ringing in your ears. And then what I said earlier, the PCBs, which can be quite deadly, can be found in places like Love Canal and stuff. Special paints used on military vehicles. Excuse me. You got special paints on military vehicles. You could have special paint on aircraft to help make the aircraft stealthier, reduce the radar signature. Depleted uranium, that there was questions back and forth. Depleted uranium, that was used in tank rounds during the Gulf War to help penetrate other tanks. X-rays, again, X-ray technicians and things like that. How long did you work in the dental? And, you know, because long time ago, you remember when dentists, not everybody, but those old people remember when dentists didn't even use gloves or anything, and some of them smoked and put this stinky breath in your face and stuck their nicotine fingers in your mouth. You got chemical and biological. You got mustard gas, the nerve agents, Project 112, I got an individual there. Herbicide test and storage, chemical experiments. Yes, the military did experiment on, they went to the Army and they went to these guys and said, hey, got a deal for you. Hey, you want like $50 a month extra? You can get your own room. You don't have to stand duty or anything. And all you have to do is, we're going to do some tests on you and stuff. And we're going to do some medicine tests and things like that. Never told these 18, 19-year-old kids what these tests were going to be. And I have one veteran that's pretty messed up because he had a lot of these tests. And is it fair? No, because, you know, as we all know, our government wants us to do the right thing, but rarely does the government stand up and do the right thing when it's time to be counted. And so, like for Camp Lejeune, so 87, that's 36 in minimum. So the Camp Lejeune, you got to be a minimum of 54 years old to be covered under Camp Lejeune. And they knew this 20 years ago. They actually knew it over 30 years ago and didn't do anything. You had officers that wanted to protect their careers and wanted to get eagles and stars, so they looked the other way. So if we go 73, yep, we're just serving, counting 50 years to the end of the Vietnam War. So the Vietnam War, the youngest you could be is 68 years old. So they've added high blood pressure, and they expanded it to Thailand, Guam. So when we look at the expansion, so we're looking at people who are basically the vast majority of the people would be 75 plus. And so last time I looked and it said there was about 600 to 650,000 veterans that actually served in the qualifying area. And one they said jokingly, but wasn't jokingly, there are more people who claim to be Vietnam veterans today than served in Vietnam from around the 1950s to the mid-70s. In the 20 years of Vietnam, there was about 3.1 million people, men and women that fit the criteria, and many of them have passed on. And so it's going to take a lot of work for surviving spouses to come in and apply for widows benefits and stuff. That's if they haven't remarried someone, got remarried. That's if they even know about it. That's if they're even alive, because the family members don't count. The Camp Lejeune, it falls under, again, a different little other category. So many would be alive. But if you stop in Camp Lejeune, the water goes back to 53. That's 70. So the youngest person that would be able to fall into that category is 88 years old. And I have one individual falls into that, two individuals that fall in that category. But, 53, 54, 55, the odds are that about 90, 95% of the people that served in there have passed on. And again, to get help for those individuals, the death certificate is going to have to list what they passed on from. Because back in those days, for a lot of times, it used to be natural causes. They don't go, well, died of a heart attack or died of this. They would just say natural causes. So you would have to have passed, you would have to have a good death certificate that would say what would happen for the widow to be able to claim veterans benefits. Okay. The the toxic exposure risk activity medical opinion. This is a non-presumptive conditions. So for in my case where I was with a non-presumptive condition. So we go in and say, for example, I go in and I go, wait a minute, I'm on, say if I'm starting today, I can go and say, yes, I have thymus cancer, which is rare. I had prostate cancer in my 40s. My heart would stop. I'm on my 4th pacemaker. I've had four strokes. The last one took me over 6 months to get home. So statistically, that doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen. You can't statistically go in and say, oh, yeah, something else could have caused it. And we go, what else could have caused it? So when I go back and I go and say, oh yeah, I had herbicides, I had burn pits, I had Camp Lejeune water supplies, I had pesticides in the Gulf War, industrial solvents, sand, dust, very small, fuels, PCBs, special paints on military vehicles. So that's how you go in and put the claim together. The VA cannot deny you the opportunity. Before, they would just say, nope, not in Vietnam, not here, not there. Your toxic risk activities. Okay, so if you go in and I go and say, I have prostate cancer because dioxin exposure. So I go in and say, hey, I can show I was exposed to dioxins. And here it is. I've got the survey, for example, Camp Kinza, Okinawa. On Camp Kinza, Okinawa, the United States Navy came in, the Seabees, they looked at it, they evaluated it, and they went and said, holy crap, we can't build a school and we can't build the barracks here because the dioxin levels are way too high. Okay? I submit that report. And then I submit another report where, oh yeah, dioxins were dumped over here and it was ran into the water supply. So again, goes, then I submit research showing, yeah, dioxins can cause, exposure can cause prostate cancer. PCBs, oh yes, those can cause up your central nervous system. And so, your central nervous system is messing up your heart rate. Sometimes it's causing your heart to stop. So when you go in and you put those together, the VA has to go in and ask the evaluator, which is called the DBQ, which is an examination for those conditions. This one was saying DBQ for dermatology for skin, for the indication. So if it goes in DBQ for central nervous system, okay, when it put the DBQ for central nervous system, the VA would have to go in and ask the examiner for his or her professional opinion whether PCBs can cause central nervous damage. Then this also, the examiner has to certify that he or she read my complete medical record, any information I sent in from private doctors, and any research that I submitted. And then, if it goes, all it is, it's more likely than not or less likely than not. That's the only, none of this, well, it's got to be beyond a reasonable doubt. No. Basically, based on the research, based on the medical, is there a likely possibility that this was caused, that PCBs could have caused this? And if the answer is yes, the VA must grant you service connection. So don't worry about cyanitis or rhininitis, and that's in the PACT Act and the burn pits. Those are throw-me's. They're not going to cover much. You might get a 0, you might get a 10%. Okay? So there's a whole bunch of things. Worry about Camp Lejeune, because the number of people that are actually going to be covered by Camp Lejeune, it's going to be a small number. This, in my opinion, is the most important thing in the PACT Act. There's in-service toxic exposure types. No one, well, the vast majority of people that serve in the military are going to have a large number of these toxic exposure types. Whether it's infantry on the rifle range, driving trucks, diesel fuel, all these different things. You know, the solvents you use to clean vehicles, the solvents you could be using to clean the barracks, you know, the solvents, you know, to clean aircraft. There's so many other solvents, other problems you can run into industrial solvents that are no longer usable in the United States because they're cancer risk, but they're usable in, say, Africa or Southeast or Southwest Asia because they have a different level and they don't have EPA standards like we do. So, you know, if you have questions, contact me, because what you may not have thought about these, but you know what? Let's stop and talk about these. What are the possibilities that some of your problems have been a result of toxic exposure types? Because remember, if you work for a company, they have a list of hazardous materials and the possible causes. If you're in the military in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, you weren't giving toxic warnings. Do what you're supposed to do. You weren't giving bunny suits or anything. Do what you're told to do. So there was a lot of things that we were exposed to. And we'd go, oh man, I just don't feel right or whatever. And they was, oh yeah, you'll get over it. The corpsman didn't know. The corpsman or the medic was only helping you to the best of his ability or her ability. Your the doctor, new captain, wasn't in the service very long. He or she was doing the best of their ability. So we have more information now. It's up to you to ask the questions, to seek out the answers. So that's all for this show, and thank you for your time.